Atlas Elementary, innovation looks like empowering students with personal leadership, rigorous academics, and innovative technology. Through the 7 habits of happy kids, with individual, class, and school-wide goal setting, Atlas students thrive in a culture of leadership and personal responsibility. For this 3rd grade class, a Think Big VEP grant provides opportunities to appreciate and understand our natural world and environmental change. Students learn that they have a voice that can be used for responding to change rather than reacting to it.
Do you feel like you can make a difference? Most likely you're here tonight because you do. Are you a risk taker? Do you take chance? Would you take a chance on someone that you didn't know? Would you take a chance on someone like me? Would you take a chance on someone who was much smaller than you? Someone who still believed that monsters lived under their beds? Well, I asked my students if they thought that they could make a difference. And half of my students said no. They didn't feel like that they were capable, that they were given the tools where someone would listen to them, where someone would give them the opportunity to make a difference in someone else's life. And it broke my heart. These are kids in my classroom who write positive affirmations on windows. These are kids who made a school garden to better our community. These are the kids who didn't feel like they could make a difference. Most of the time, our students are hushed these days, mostly by our own insecurities, because we don't know what they're going to say. And why not give them a voice? Why not allow them to speak their own truth? Most of the time, we tell our students what we want them to hear. We tell them what we want them to do. But what if we let go of some of those reins? What if we gave them the opportunity to surprise us? Now, they say kids say the darndest things, and they sure do. This is one of my students. His name is Jonathan. And we were talking about natural hazards. And we were talking about the winds. And we got into the speech of Santa Ana winds. And then we started talking about different natural hazards that can affect other people around us. How does a natural hazard affect how we live? How can it affect our neighbors, our community? Well, he raises his hand. He's very inquisitive. I always know that I'm going to get some very witty, very clever comment from him. But I said, okay, well, what do you have to say? And he said, well, I heard that this one place, it was raining fish and frogs. And I said, okay, well, now in my head, right, I'm like, okay, well, is this doing damage? Am I doing damage control, or am I going to go with it? And we had just gotten off the topic of hurricanes, and we had talked about Hurricane Katrina and how that had affected the area in which they lived, and it had affected people's lives. Well, he was under the impression that at some point it could physically rain frogs and fish, and he was certain, like that was going to happen. And I said, okay, well, let's talk about it. I said, could a fish and a frog actually come down from the clouds? Now the whole class is up in arms, right? Half of the class is saying, yeah, it could totally happen. And half of the class is saying, no. So now they're at each other. And I said, okay, let's talk about it. So we got into the conversation of, sometimes when a flood might happen, or a hurricane, or some strong winds, and they might pick up something that doesn't normally belong there. And after going over into a discussion, I thought I was doing a pretty good job of explaining it, but in the end, I think he was thinking that I had no idea what I was saying. But it was the chance for me to get a feel for where their minds go and the creativity behind just some of the answers that come out of their mouth, and how I can adjust my teaching to encourage some of their creativity. So these are my students. These are the first group of students who are going to reap the benefits of our Think Big grant. And through this grant, we wanted to build awareness. We want to show them that it's important to be aware of who they're around, how they make other people feel, and how they feel. because a lot of times they change how they act and how they feel depending on who they're with. And we want them to get a feel for how that they can make a difference and they can bring awareness to other students. And so through this grant, we were able to create a pathway for them to show their awareness towards what's happening in the real world, because to them, they're the center of their universe. So I wanted them to become aware of how their actions affect everything else around them. So through time-lapse video, which is just one aspect of our grant, we were able to create our own data. So instead of looking up our research on YouTube or looking up someone else's research, we made our own. And it's hard enough going over weather patterns in Southern California because we usually have about the same weather patterns year-round. Our students were able to find their own weather patterns and the life cycles of plants and animals through data that they created in classrooms. And this was just such a small part about what VEP gave to us. Through their knowledge of what happens in our lives, through their knowledge of what happens in our environment, they're going to be engineering prototypes to be able to affect change in someone else's life. So now that they're aware of what's around them, they're able to make a difference in someone else's life because their minds have been open to the chance of and possibility. So right when we think that life is going smooth, we get that curveball, right? The loss of a family member, mudslides, fire. And we go into survival mode. And as an adult, right, you're going into survival mode for yourself, for your family, for your pets, for your neighbors. But as a teacher, we are also in survival mode for our kids. And not only are we thinking about how this is affecting us, but we know that we have to be aware of how those kids are now going to come back to us after something has happened in their life. And through VEP, we were able to use their experiences to better the next generation. So we used what they experienced to talk about it, to bring out emotion, to get them to understand that they can change just a little bit and it would positively affect someone's life. So going back, when I asked them if they felt like they could make a difference, and they said no, I, again, broke my heart. And I said, so why? Like, why would you say no? And they just flat out said, because adults don't always listen to us. You know, I couldn't tell her she was wrong, but I wanted them to understand when I said make a difference, I didn't mean that their world, they had to go out and physically do something. It could have been an idea. It could have been something small. It could have been something that they created on their own. And once I brought their world into the classroom, the outside world into the classroom, and they saw how little of a change that they could make, and they could make it bigger, and they could make it bigger, then they were all like, yeah, well, we could do that. So I guess I just learned I just need to phrase my questions better. Because they do believe that they can make a difference, but I guess it just depends on what kind of difference they're looking to make. So you all have that teacher, that person in your life who really made a difference to you. And going into my 6th grade year, I moved from a smaller campus to a very, very large city, and I knew no one. And middle school was very scary. And this is a very similar thing to what our own students in Ventura are going through, right? They're going from a small school setting to a very large middle school setting. And most of the time, they're going with people that they know, their friends that they've grown up with. But I hated 6th grade. It was so scary. I didn't know where to sit for lunch. I didn't know where my classes were. I was totally lost. We had lockers at the time. Who knew about locker combinations? Had no idea. But then I met my science teacher, Mr. Vanderveen. He was like 7 feet tall, and I'm not like exaggerating. He had to duck to get into the classroom. He was so tall. And just your average science teacher, right? We did electric circuits. We even made those model cells where you make them out of food, right? And the class just smells like frosting for like a month. I remember I ended up making mine out of pizza. And so I digress. But Mr. Vanderveen opened his door for me. And he saw that I was an outsider. And he let me take the time to find my place. And if I needed someone to talk to, or I needed somewhere to eat, or if I needed just some support, he was there. And he didn't do anything out of the ordinary that not any other teacher would do. But it's what I needed at the time. So I want you to think about that one person. You know, there's always that one person. And if you don't feel like you have been that person for someone yet, there's still so many chances to be that person for someone else. So of course, you know, I found Mr. Vanderveen 20, 30, some odd years later off Facebook, right? And he's retired now, but he was like, you're speaking about what? Like, he doesn't even know, right? He doesn't even know of the difference that he made in my life. And that's just so humbling, right? And I feel like we can learn just so much from that. So my challenge to you is this. Remember when you were a kid and you still thought that monsters lived under your bed, and you still thought that you could, you know, fight off those fire-breathing dragons. But remember that time when you found the courage to look under your bed and realize that life was a little bit more manageable than what you thought it was. Well, our kids are trying to do that right now. They're trying to find a way to make life that much more manageable. And that's through our student voice and through their ability to make a difference. And in this ever-changing world, this dynamic world that we can't keep up with, you have the opportunity to make that difference. And, you know, I want you to lay under the stars and just think about how you're going to do that. And think back to that little kid that you were, and who was that person, and who really made a difference in your life. Thank you.